Hello and welcome to and Sacred Sister.
Three such charm, yeah, perfect.
Yeah, that's it.
Got this.
Hello and welcome to the Alright, this is it, we're going.
This is perfect. Laughter breath is definitely part of the ritual. We have to put that in there.
Absolutely.
We're getting so much laughter right before this episode. That's a sign. Laughter. People need to bring more laughter into their spiritual practice.
No, it's so
This is
true.
the reason why this is happening.
Yeah, because it can be so serious
Yeah.
sometimes. That's exactly the whole stream of messaging that we want to abolish here and now.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, sacred sister, a kindred flame, may we light one another. From the ashes rise, oh, we rise, oh, again.
Hello and welcome to the Sacred Sister podcast,
Where we normalize the magic.
and Sacralize the Mundane. My name is Brett,
And I'm Hannah.
and we are so excited to bring you yet another episode. Happy May. Today is May Day. And before we hop into the intro and let you know what we're going to be talking about today, we just wanted to go over a few things as like a little bit of a housekeeping and let you kind of know how grateful we are for you, pretty much. We wanted to first off open up and just let everyone know we are so grateful. It's been almost a month and a half since we started this podcast, and we have gotten some ratings. We've gotten a review that we really want to share.
Yes.
So I think we kind of want to be highlighting these just because our gratitude is so great. And we love seeing the way that this podcast resonates with you, and we would just love to see these ratings and reviews continue rolling in. If you haven't already subscribed to this podcast and you find yourself resonating deeply with it, please, we invite and encourage you to subscribe. And if there is a little notification bell, check that so that you not only subscribe to it, but you get a little notification every 2 weeks when a brand new episode is uploaded.
And let's read that review. It is so cute. This review is by BCC, and it says, "Need more of this. This podcast is perfect for getting into the subtle qualities of life and understanding ourselves on a deeper level. If you're looking to dive deep and laugh with these wonderful ladies, you should listen."
You know what I so love about that? We're probably going to put in a teensy bit of the beginning, but we probably just spent 6 minutes trying to do the intro, just like, hello and welcome to Sacred Sister Podcast, for like 6 minutes, because we could not stop laughing.
It was just so funny. All this laughter was just coming out and through us, and we see it as a sign. It's a sign because this whole episode is about spiritual practice. And a lot of times we can be so serious about spiritual practice and what it means, and we forget to just laugh and let out our inner child.
Yeah, to be lighthearted and to think of spiritual practice as, yes, something that can be a super transformative tool in your life toward up-leveling yourself and evolving and becoming a more beautiful, great person, but also having fun and connecting with that inner child piece of you that just finds joy and laughter in pretty much everything and anything.
Yes, and seeing the wonders of the world and the miracles that are happening on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much for the review, BCC, and we're going to be sharing a review every episode from now on.
Yes, and I just want to add that being in that lighthearted place, if you find that you are having a hard time finding signs or synchronicities or miracles occurring in your everyday reality, I especially invite you to invite in that lighthearted laughter, because when you're energetically more open, meaning when you're laughing, you're usually not bitter and upset and angry about something else in that exact moment. Invite more of that in so that you can be in an energetically more open space so that you can be open and available to receive those kinds of messages as well.
Yes, and children can be such a wonderful teacher in that too.
Mm-hmm.
Just noticing how children see the world for the first time and remembering how it was for us for the first time to walk barefoot on the grass or to feel the sunshine, and just little things that we do on a regular basis that is so easy to overlook. But when we just tune into that space, then we see the beauty and the humor in life.
Exactly. And isn't that such a perfect introduction to this episode?
Yes.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so what are we going to be talking about today?
So we're going to be talking about spiritual practice. Why is it important? What does it look like? How do I start one? How often is enough? That's going to be an interesting one to touch on. We're also going to be sharing what our practices look like personally. We're going to touch on some misconceptions about spiritual practice and also add some things that you could maybe use for your own spiritual practice if they resonate with
as
you.
a part of the action guide.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. We are going to be touching on all of these things, and just like all of our other episodes, we believe that it is so heart-opening and grounding to slip into a guided meditation before we open up conversation on this beautiful topic and on this wonderful May Day. So Hannah is going to facilitate a little guided meditation today, and let's hop right into it.
Yeah, so find a comfortable seat, and if you are able to close your eyes, do so. Obviously, if you're driving, do not do so. But let's just take a moment. It's really, the word meditation can trigger some things. But let's just really take a moment to dive into our own being right now in this moment. And so I ask you to just put your hand onto your chest and listen to your heartbeat. This is the rhythm of your life. This is your heart beating at all times. We're not even consciously aware of it for the most part, but it is providing us with all oxygen and blood, everything that the body needs. It's the engine of our life. And see if you can tune into that heartbeat. See it as a beating drum that is accompanying your life like a soundtrack. And now on top of that, let's focus on our breath. Really take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the nose. Really focus, bring awareness onto your breath. And allow it to be a part of that music that is being played within you. Our Our breathing can sound like ocean waves brushing against the beach. This beautiful natural rhythm of life. Allow the oxygen to come into your body, into every cell of your being, shooting throughout the whole body. And now when you close your eyes, focus on the center between your eyebrows. And just allow to let anything come up that wants to come up. You may notice some colors, some sparkles. I'm seeing a lot of yellow right now. You may notice some little lines or forms and shapes. Or maybe nothing comes up for you, and that's okay too. Because whatever comes up is exactly what you need right now. And just allow yourself to be the observer to either a black background or to the sparkles or the light, the colors, the shapes. Maybe you see an eye, or maybe you have a vision. Whatever it is, just allow yourself to be the observer without any attachment or expectation. Everything that you need is within you. Every answer that you seek is within you in this space right now. And all we need to do is just allow ourselves to create a space to listen and to allow ourselves to receive the answer. Let's take a deep breath in together. And sigh it out. Start wiggling your fingers and have a deep breath in. And sigh it out and shake it up too. Maybe do a little stretch. Have a deep breath in and out. When you had your eyes closed, you can now open your eyes whenever you're ready. And just come back into this room. Welcome. Maybe reflect a bit on what you've seen. And even if you didn't see anything, reflect on what that nothingness gives you. How does that nothingness support you?
So interesting. Something that that popped up for me in a moment of absolute presence was this past season of my life where I wasn't accustomed to what presence felt like, and how calming it is to be in a place of absolute presence where it's like a feeling of confidence, that you don't have to be questioning things.
Yeah.
You don't have to be wondering if you should be doing something else, or is this happening the right way, or, you know, all these different things that we can second guess inherently because the world around us tells us to be second guessing ourselves all the time. And that anxiety that builds up from possibly not doing it the right way keeps us from just feeling like we're so solid.
Yes.
In one space.
Yes, and we are so connected to really everything. And then being in that space, what it does for me is I notice how we are all connected, how everything is connected, how everything that happens in life has a connection to what is going on right now. And seeing that connection makes it even more magical in life, because we can just be like, oh, that's just random, that's just coincidence. But even just noticing, you know, we had these 6 minutes of laughter before this episode, and then just noticing the connection. Okay, this is something that we need to touch on.
Yeah, because all we've been talking about in the notes is continually coming back to that place of don't take it so serious, lighten it up, you know. Yeah, don't take it so serious.
Yes. Yeah, so what is a spiritual practice, and why is it important?
Really, it depends. Whatever you feel that is a practice, the options are literally infinite and limitless. Who's to say what is or is not a spiritual practice? That's something to look at. If ever someone says something works for them and someone wants to point a finger and say like, that is not perfect. Hereby the spiritual practice book. This is not in there. No, anything that gives you that feeling of connectedness, whether it's connectedness to the present moment, to a person, to the season of your life, to today, to this breath, to your spirit, to anything. To anything. Everything can be considered spiritual practice. Really, it's just a place of looking inside of yourself and having integrity whenever you ask yourself and saying like, okay, what does this really feel like for me? Because you can put flourishy, fancy bows on things and present a spiritual practice like this is the ultimate, but on a way deeper level, you know whether or not that's the truth.
Oh, yes. Yes, and we touched on that before this episode. We really want to say about the the things that is happening with social media and how easily it is to compare ourselves in a negative way, and seeing how spiritual practices look like with other people and for other people, and how everything can look so perfect and pretty, and you think like, okay, in order to even have a spiritual practice, I need to have this perfect altar with the perfect tools on it, and it needs to be set up this way, and it needs to look so pretty that I can make an Instagram post about it. And really what we want to say with this episode is like, no, it can be that way if that's something that resonates with you and if that is happening in your life, but it doesn't have to be that way in order for you to have a spiritual practice. It is really about, like Britt said, just allowing yourself to go within, ask yourself questions, reflect, and create that space of listening and connecting.
And on that realm of thinking, there is something that spiritual teacher Abraham Hicks says, which is, when it feels good, get more specific, like hone in on it more, go deeper into the vortex, get more specific, meaning like make your spiritual practice tailored to what you feel is going to be right for you in that moment. But also, if it's feeling like it's too much, zoom out and make it more vague and kind of like back off, so that if, like, sometimes my spiritual practice looks like dusting my altar.
Yeah. Or even dusting the house.
Yeah, dusting, anything. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be anything specific. It can just be like
it
taking a
is
breath or
such-
two.
It is such a spiritual practice to clean. It is crazy. Like,
Well, yeah, especially if you've got hardship around cleaning, for sure.
oh yeah, and like if you look into feng shui, you know, if there's a chi flowing through our house, also through our body, but also through our house, and when there's anything like clutter, the chi is not flowing right. You know, it's not flowing easily. You know what is right and wrong, but it's not flowing easily. It's going a little bit harder. And that might be good for a little while, but at some point when you feel like some energies within yourself are stuck, it can be so freeing to clean and to declutter and to let go. And that's a spiritual practice right there. And it seems so mundane and so ordinary, and we all do it. And we can just combine that with the meaning behind it of like, when I declutter this, I'm also decluttering this area in my life within myself, or I'm also decluttering those overwhelming emotions or anger or resentment within myself. And ta-da, that's a ritual, and ta-da, it's working.
Ta-da, you just sacralize the mundane, girl.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so true, because I love what you said there about taking something that's so mundane, taking something that's so ordinary here in our physical life, but if you allow yourself to see that as like a symbol, and what does all of that represent, and then you look into the subconscious about like how you feel about that act of decluttering or doing the dishes or the thing that you don't really want. Usually it's not necessarily about just that one thing, it's the way that you feel about doing the thing. So whenever you allow yourself the space to address those things, when you're done completing the task, you can really take a step back and like rejoice and celebrate yourself. And invite in so much self-love and just like, oh yes, I did it. And on those really small levels, you're able to like create an entirely different self-talk practice.
Yes.
And be like, the littlest thing that maybe other people are not going to praise you for, you can say like, I don't even need your praise because I love that I did that.
I'm proud of myself.
Yeah, I'm proud of myself.
Yeah.
I feel like this is another stream of our messaging with this podcast in particular, because there's so many places in the outside worlds that we're not made to celebrate ourselves, or that it feels selfish to do the self-care. And it's just so...
And there's so many shoulds out there too. Like, I should be doing this, or I shouldn't be doing that. And I feel like it's part of spiritual practice too, to remind ourselves what is true to us. Because so many people from the outside can have all kinds of opinions, and even everything that we're saying right now, we want you to ask yourself the question, what is true for me? Because we're not here to like indoctrinate anything into your brain. We want you to ask those questions for yourself, so you figure out what is that truth, what feels right for you. But all we want to do also is to just allow yourself to create a spiritual practice in your everyday life that can be in all kinds of different ways, and we're going to touch on how ours look like. Do you want to touch on how yours looks like?
Yeah, let's get right into that. So I guess there are a few layers to what does mine look like. Something I definitely want to touch on is that when I very first started out in my first few years of this quote-unquote spiritual awakening, I created these attachments to the spiritual practices that really resonated with me and really felt good, like doing yoga asana every day for 60 to 90 minutes a day, 6 days a week. That was what my very disciplined practice looked like. That's what made me feel good. And I just want to say that the reason that that was perfect for me at that specific time in my life, and it wasn't later, was because when I was in my yoga teacher training, one of the first like really introspective things, self-reflective things that I realized about myself in the yoga teacher training was, why don't I commit myself to any one thing? I realized that I grew up with parents that told me I wasn't good at something and that's okay, much more than they encouraged me to be persistent and get good at one thing and stay the course and develop it and grow it. And when I realized that, it made me cry. I think that was one of the very first times at my yoga teacher training that I found out something painful about myself. It was like the aha moment that was hard to look at. And I love going back and looking at that in that specific journal. It was my first journal, and first journal as an adult. And looking at that little sentence, why can't I commit myself to anything, is written so tiny because I was so ashamed to admit it to myself. So that was my perfect piece of spiritual practice development right from the beginning, was like really committing myself to a very rigorous physical exertion because I had never done that in my life. And about 2 years into that practice, I noticed, oh my gosh, I actually don't know if this is serving me to my highest potential, because when I don't do yoga, I have a really nasty attitude because I think that everybody is getting in my way from doing my spiritual practice. So I very actively took a step back and said, okay, I'm going to not do yoga asana for a while so that I can assess these other things that obviously need to be looked at. So this is another thing that I want to say, is that we have seasons for seasonal practice or for spiritual practice. And who's to say how long the seasons are going to last? You're the only person who knows when it's maybe time to, okay, maybe that's not resonating as much in this season of my life. What really inspires me? What feels good to try? What feels very powerful for me? So for me personally right now, I have just very recently started journaling again. I have not always, the 4 years of my spiritual awakening, I've been very, very into journaling. And for the few months that my mom was in cancer treatment and wound up passing in January. Those months surrounding that were way too painful to journal because it was hard enough to deal with in reality. I didn't want to like rehash everything in my journal. And I'm just coming back to that now, and it feels so good. And really, it's not just journaling. I'll smudge my house. I'll light my candles of presence. I'll work with my mother. I'll do eye gazing with my mama. I stay in constant communication with my mama, and I wear pieces of hers every single day because it makes me feel more connected with her, namely her jade bracelet that I massage myself with all the time, and my little urn necklace that has a blue topaz crystal on it that opens my communication with her.
Oh, yeah.
So,
and your communication to the world, too. She's speaking through you.
She's the wind beneath my wings. Yeah,
So
I mean, it's different all the time. It's funny now that I'm asking, what does mine look like? It looks like so many different things.
Yeah.
So infinite things. I do yoga. I wash the dishes. So many things. It's hard to like, unless I took up the whole hour, which I'm not going to do. Because I could do it, but I'm not going to do it.
Yes. Yeah, totally. And I feel like that is part of this episode too, you know, allowing you, the listener, to know that whatever you're doing in your spiritual practice, when it works for you, that is perfect. That is exactly what you need. If it's something that you're looking to expand and you want to find out how can I add to things, maybe you get inspired by this episode and add some things to your spiritual practice, what we've been doing. For me personally, my spiritual practice has shifted too since I'm a mama, for sure. I don't have like as much time anymore to just how should I say it? To just sit and be, because beforehand I was doing that for hours. I was doing hours meditation and really focusing on like out-of-body experience and and just really allowing myself to drift off on different journeys. And obviously, as a mom, I can't do it in that extended way anymore. That's what I thought. So I shifted my point of view about it, because my space, what was my spiritual room, became my baby's room. So my space was basically taken away from me, and it was hard at first. It was hard. And I thought, because I felt like my spiritual practice was connected to the space, which is not the case. And we want to say that here in the episodes too. Like, you don't need a physical place to have a spiritual practice. It's helpful, but you don't need it. And what I've realized is I have so much downtime, in a sense, because I'm nursing my baby. So I'm like, laying there in bed with her. And now I use this time to meditate, and I use this time to channel and to connect to spirit and to reflect and do shadow work and whatever comes up in my life. And it's perfect. It is just so helpful in that way. And it was really shifting for me, realizing that I don't need to have a set up altar and spiritual space in one room in order to do that. And even I don't even need to have a time where I'm just by myself. I can even combine it with things that I do, like with nursing or with doing the laundry, or just different things where I just like always now, even taking a shower, doing my spiritual practice in the shower. It's just get curious, just get flexible with what you're doing, because if you have a busy lifestyle, it's not easy to be like, okay, I take out an hour of my day to just sit in front of an altar. I know that some people of us are able to do that, but not everyone is. And so just realizing, hey, you can do all these things while you're doing other things, because if, just like we said, with cleaning up, we can make that into a spiritual practice if we really go deeper into it and see the meaning behind it. So
I want to touch on that, because I think you hit the nail on the head so well in the fact that you're a mama. This is something I do not have experience with yet in my life, but I feel like upon talking to people, sometimes they use that almost as an excuse, like it's a privileged thing that only single young women who don't have a lot of responsibilities can do. And it's like, I'm a mom. I can't just do that. And this is where we can kind of build those confines and boundaries for ourselves that keep us from the things that are for our highest good, by having these beliefs, these limiting beliefs. Do you understand? Maybe we haven't talked about a lot of what limiting belief is. We'll definitely touch a ton on the limiting beliefs and programs and what they look like in the future. But do you see that having a belief that your life has to look a specific way in order to do something that you know is really good for yourself and that you want for yourself, and that it's not attainable unless X, Y, and Z that's not probable in your reality is attained? That's a program that is keeping you from your highest self, which is that you can have spiritual practice anytime that you want. Even when you were talking about you named a lot of things that you could be doing with yourself. What I was thinking of is being in the car sometimes. I just took a road trip with my dad, my nephew, and my niece last week, and it was a 10-hour drive both ways. And sometimes you find yourself challenged in the car, whether you're in a frustrating conversation or whatever, and even just closing your eyes and taking a few breaths right then and there, even if other people are having other conversations around you, and just like, settling into your space. I don't have to be in a reactive mode right now. Find the love, focus on the next inhale. It's like we give the power to whatever thought that we want to see grow. So in those moments, we can give power to say, I want to get really upset because I want something that I feel like is unattainable for me, or I can say, I choose a different perspective. I choose that I am in control and have power over my own life, and I can make my spiritual practice look however I want to make it look.
Yes, and a lot of times those limitations are actually the things that are getting us deeper into our practice. And the reason when, those times where we can't run away from it, because if you're, in the living room with your family, you could just go out and be like, I'm out of here, I'm just gonna do my thing. But if you're in a car, you can't. Same for me. When I'm a mom, I can't just be like, I'm just out of here, I'm gonna go
Emma, I'm out.
I'm going on an astral journey right now, bye-bye. I can't do it. So I have to find other ways of doing my spiritual practice, and that actually helped me to go deeper into it. And it's the same when you're a business owner, or if you're like, if you're really having a lot of work to do and in your job, it's the same thing. We can be so easily distracted and think that we don't have time for spiritual practice, but we can make time. You will always find time. There is always at least 10 minutes a day where you can sit and reflect, and you don't necessarily have to sit, but where you can reflect and ask yourself questions. There's always time if you want it.
And we're going to be getting more into that in our action guide at the end. Yes. Perfect. So what would you say to someone who is curious to start a spiritual practice? How would you approach that?
That's a good one. It can be really overwhelming to just look at it and be like, what is this that these people talk about? Reflecting, what does that mean? What is shadow work? What is channeling? What is any of this? What is saging the house? For me, what really helps is to start simple. Start with one thing that resonates with you and try that out. And just like we said before, we're going through seasons, we're going through different phases. That thing may be working out for you well for a while, and then after a while it might not, and that's okay too, and you might take a break from it. But what I feel like is part of practice, the word of practice, comes with it being regularly. So ideally you find something that you can do mostly daily. It doesn't have to be every single day, and then if you don't do it, you feel guilty and shameful about it. No, we don't want to go into that. But just something that you can do on a regular basis. And what really has helped me a lot was going with the moon. Living by the moon. This is something that has stuck with me for years now, pretty much since I got into astrology. And we're going to be having a whole episode just on the moon phases and how to use those moon phases. But even just thinking about new moons and planting the seeds of intentions on new moon, and on full moons, releasing, letting go, and celebrating. Just as simple as that. And then from then on, when that becomes normal in your life, you can add more to it. Maybe add the first quarter or the last quarter if that's something you want to do. Or maybe add yoga to it, or add regular chanting. Whatever it is. But I feel like start with one thing, keep it simple, and see what happens.
Yeah, I think when I very first started thinking of utilizing spiritual practices as tools, there was like a light that went off in my head, and I envisioned myself like this glorious, beautiful goddess with like a literal carpentry tool belt on.
I love those.
Yeah. It's like, here are my decks, here are my tarot cards, my oracle decks, my crystals, my sage, my sweetgrass, my, all the little things that having a few years in a practice and organically allowing myself to be led, because this is another thing. If you feel like you're even listening to this right now and you're still in a quandary that's like, what does this look like? Even sitting down, closing your eyes, taking a few breaths, and putting your intention out there to say, I'm ready to open myself to a new season of life. And perhaps I've been in whatever place I've been in but now I'm ready to enter into a place, and I'm ready to be guided to a practice that's going to be resonant for me. You will be guided. Whether it's a conversation, if it's a thing that you see on Facebook, like if you're feeling led to open up a conversation to somebody else and then they wind up, leading you to something, who knows? Infinite possibilities as to where the guidance can come from, but you will be.
Yes.
So
I think you touched on something beautiful there too. The feeling of needing to have it all together right away, instead of allowing it to naturally come into your life. And I feel like that's another thing with comparison. If we, negatively compare ourselves to someone who has been doing a spiritual practice for years on years, and then you look into it and be like, oh wow, they have all these different tools, they do all these things throughout the day, they can just easily implement that into their everyday life. Like, what am I doing wrong? Why is this so hard for me? Well, it's because they had a lot of trial and error. They failed a lot of times. They tried off different things, and those are the things that stuck with them and that worked for them. But it came with time. And again, we want to say, allow yourself to start small from the bottom of the tree and slowly move up, because sometimes we can compare ourselves to others that are already way ahead on the journey. They can really be inspiring to us, and this is the positive thing about comparison, because we can see that it's possible, and we can see like, hey, this is really inspiring, I want to get to that place. But also knowing I am that person too. This is a part of me. This is part of my future self, and I'm tuning into that and allowing myself to become that.
Yeah, admiration is such a beautiful thing to touch on. I love that you just said that right now. Take a look at that if you're feeling a little lost or confused as well. Take a look at the people that you admire and what it is that you admire about them, and know that that admiration is a little piece that's inside of you that is yearning to be expressed in such a confident way that it is already inside of you. And with a little bit of honing and tending to that little flicker of a flame that's inside of you that wants to be expressed, it can start to more easily find its way to come out.
Yes, and it's the same with jealousy as well. You call it admiration, but oftentimes, we call it jealousy, or you were jealous of someone. And
well, those are different energies, huh?
It is, but it's the same kind of thing. If you're jealous of someone...
The same coin, two sides.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yeah, it's the same coin and two sides of it. Admiration is looked at it from a positive perspective more so, and jealousy is looked at it from a negative perspective.
From like a lack.
From a lack
that they
perspective.
Have something that I want and I cannot have.
But then realizing, where does that jealous feeling come from? Oh, it's something in my heart that admires them, because it is part of myself that wants to come out and wants to be seen and wants to be tended to.
Yeah, something else I wanted to touch on that you already started to that I really love is that one of the greatest gifts of finding a true spiritual practice that really resonates with you is that it is a lifelong practice. And that it is, for me, the perfect antidote to this super fast-paced instant gratification modern world that we live in now, where so much is so easily accessible, because what's that quote? The ears of wisdom open only to the whispers of time. Oh, I love that. The first moment I heard that, I was just like, I'm gonna say it again too. The ears of wisdom open only to the whispers of time. Meaning sometimes we want the knowledge, we want the wisdom, we want all the things that we know that a long practice holds. But there's no shortcutting that stuff.
There's no shortcut.
You can try to, but the result is going to be, it's like cheaper.
Yeah.
It's like cheaper, because the greatest things come with lots of time and a strong foundation. So what I really want to stress more than anything else is just to take a seat, to get yourself comfortable, to understand that the greatest things in life take time in order to have that really true core, meaningful core. And yeah, the that's where so many blessings can come from, and that our spirit is going to be with us till the end.
Yes,
we have
forever.
so many decades, hopefully.
Yeah, and I mean, our spirit and soul, if that's part of the belief system, are living forever. So we have not only just decades in this lifetime, hopefully, but we have many other lifetimes where we can try out things and do things. So a lot of times we get caught up in thinking we need to cram everything into one lifetime, and it doesn't have to be that way. For example, for me, it was something where I felt like I felt really called to write a book, and I'm still gonna write books, but just like sometimes I just still feel like I need to push myself to have that as a regular practice, which is also a spiritual practice, to write, to automatic writing or write journaling and write your biography or whatever it is. But then pushing myself into that point where I get too rigid about it and I feel guilty when I don't do it. And then I'm like, no, it's just not the time for it. And if it doesn't happen, if I die before I finish this book, it's okay. It's okay. Like, everything is well. Because even after people have crossed over, I mean, there are many accounts of books from people that channeled people who have crossed over. So even if you crossed over, you can still find someone, channel through them, and they write the book for you. Perfect.
And for anyone who's sitting back staring at their radio like, Hannah's a crazy lady. I thought I liked this podcast. We probably in season 2 are going to start talking about alternate lives and past lives and opening up about how not like out there it is, if you want it to be.
And also, this is the humor of life, you can take it or leave it. If it doesn't resonate with you, it's all good.
Yeah, really, we don't know what is going on here. With these lives that we have.
And if we think that we know everything, that's another shadow work to do, because that's when we realize, wow, we think that we are this amazing spiritual teacher that doesn't have to learn everything or anything anymore. That's when we actually have to learn a lot.
Yeah, and I love that you touched on this rigidity thing. It reminds me of a conversation with a guy that used to live in our house. He used to be a roommate of ours, and I loved having him as a roommate because we could just like sit and have really philosophical conversations all the time. And I remember having this conversation with him one time where I asked him, do you consider yourself to have a spiritual practice? And like this seriousness settled in, and he was like, oh, I could never say that about myself. And I was like, what? Why not? I see you practice yoga every day, like you're into meditation. Why do you say that? And he, was just like, so, well, what is a spiritual practice? I don't know. I don't know what a spiritual practice is or is not. And I could just never say that about myself. And I left that conversation like, wow, what an interesting thing. I never would understand that people have thoughts about spiritual practice like that unless I opened up communication about it. But it's funny because I saw him just recently and I was like, man, do you remember that conversation? And he was like, yeah, I took stuff super seriously. And he had definitely kind of loosened up a little bit.
Oh, nice.
But that is something to, I don't know, just a little story to see if there are parts of you and where the parts are that have this staunch seriousness about them, and ask yourself, like, when did that start creeping in? Was it something that somebody else told me? Sometimes we can just get so righteous about stuff that, it's super interesting.
And I feel like it's so funny because it's spiritual practice, but if you talk about physical practice or physical exercise, if you ask someone, hey, do you have a physical exercise? No one is gonna say like, oh my gosh, I could never say this about myself. Because people say like, yeah, I go to the gym once or twice a week, or like, yeah, I do yoga regularly, or they say, no, I don't. Whatever it is. But it's when it's a physical part of what we do, then it's so much easier to say yes or no to it. But then when the spiritual aspect comes into it, then suddenly it seems like something outside of ourselves.
Like a pedestal kind of thing that we can never attain because it's so great.
Yes. And that's a whole nother thing. And I've been to ceremonies where that pedestal thinking and that rigidity was taken very seriously, and really, meditations and rituals were taken out from books, were taken out from other spiritual teachers, and were cited exactly word by word so that they appear perfect. But the thing was that the magic was missing. At least for me. I mean, I can't say for everyone that was a part of the ceremony, but for me, it just didn't feel true to their heart. It didn't feel like that's what their soul wanted to say. It felt more like that's what their mind wanted to say in order to make it sound perfectly. And I understand where they're coming from, because the first times when we did ceremony, we were also like, okay, we need to prepare for this, so we need to be super organized.
Those were the most anxious times of my week, usually, or of the month, because we were doing new moon. So for anyone that doesn't know us personally, Hannah and I started out doing moon ceremonies together about almost a year and a half ago, and having them for the community. And yeah, she would come over a little bit before the ceremony would start, and people would start arriving, and we'd go through this whole checklist that we had. And for me, gosh, I was so anxious because there was a part of me that just wanted to do things so perfectly, and I wanted to appear in this spiritual way for people that it was like, I know what's going on, and I can lead this, and I can facilitate this. And it's funny looking back on it now, because I feel like that's such an important piece of medicine. Really having that integrity whenever you feel like you're approaching something that's quote unquote spiritual. Where's your ego at? What is it what kind of attachments are you feeling? Do you want to appear a certain way? Do you want to speak in a certain way that presents yourself in a super ultra spiritual way? All these are little things to look at, and there's no harm, no foul, no shame whatsoever.
We've all been through.
We've all been there.
Because ultimately those things come out of fear. They're just like the little fear inside of us, maybe fear of judgment, or fear of not fitting in, or fear of not being seen, or fear of being misunderstood, or whatever fear it might be for us. But a lot of times ego is coming up when there is a fear inside of us. And that's where the fun thing with spiritual practice comes in, because we are constantly dealing with the ego. It's never going to be like, okay, I am completely ego-less and I am just as all-enlightened being at all times in my life. No, because spiritual practice that's a part of spiritual practice. That's why we incarnated, because we do want to integrate the ego into our lives. Ego, the human self with all its fears and everything, is part of our life. And it's okay. We don't have to shun it. We don't have to push it away and make it less spiritual. This is why we do this podcast, because we want to say, hey, the most mundane, physical, human experience that you're having is spiritual. If you want it to be.
If you want it to be. And don't let anybody tell you that it's not. Anybody that wants to get in your way like that probably doesn't need to be in your life, or even talk to you about that thing in that way. I'm not saying cut everybody out of your life. That's not spiritual. I mean, all of us are spiritual.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I think that's a really big thing that you just touched on, because I feel like a lot of times in spiritual community, it's like, I need to cut off everyone who's not having a spiritual practice because they're influencing me in a negative way, or they're giving me drama or whatnot.
That's toxic.
Yes.
Yeah, that's also not, like, it's okay to do that for seasons of our life sometimes, right? Because then taking a look at what the toxicity is. It's like sometimes we for sure need to set boundaries from people in specific ways, but is it like hermiting yourself so much that you're like, I cannot be in a physical place without feeling completely overwhelmed energetically.
And we're going to touch on like spiritual boundaries as well.
And protection.
Yes. But yeah, even just noticing when certain people just keep coming into our lives, it's not them, it's us. Certain situations, certain people that just keep coming up like a pattern. We do not have to blame others for it. But that's just such a great opportunity to look within ourselves and be like, why does this keep coming up in my life? And how can I change my perspective, my belief system, my actions to manifest something else?
Because essentially what everything boils down to is fear or love, coming from either fear or love. So what I love that you touched on yesterday when we were planning for this episode was just saying how necessary fear is and how it is literally the greatest teacher. And we don't ever want to find ourselves in a point where we're saying, no fears, I don't want to deal with fears, I don't have time for fears, love and light forever for all eternity, because the fears are the greatest mirrors to show us what our spirit is wanting us to look at so that we can be more free.
Yes. And like we said I want to say in the second episode when we talk about masculine and feminine energies and the balance, we don't want to say like, okay, just love, like 100% love, 0% fear, or we can say mostly love.
You've already said mostly a few times this episode, and I wanted to be like, refer to episode 2.
And what I want to touch on too is just because we've been saying like, hey, it's all about, going within and finding your own way of doing things. But at the same time, we also want to say it can be really, really helpful to learn rules or guidelines in like how to do rituals or how to manifest with the moon or how to do astrology or how to do tarot or how to cleanse yourself and your house, like just different practices. It can be super helpful to learn them. And because first we gotta know what we need to know and then we can make it our own. And just like Pablo Picasso says, first learn the rules and then break them.
Yeah, you always want to know just to have a regard and an overall foundation of what it is that you're starting out with and then making it your own.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So really,
well, I want to actually tell a story real quick.
Yeah, girl.
It's the story. So it's the story about the hermit and the mantra. And I feel like it's gonna summarize the whole episode of this and just kind of allowing us to really
let it sink in.
Thank you. Yes. So it's one of those Zen stories, and it's about a spiritual teacher, and he has been practicing mantra, like a certain mantra. And he's been getting really, really good at it. And he's been practicing for years, got to the point where he thought that he has a spiritual practice that is perfect, that does need no change anymore, and he doesn't need to learn from anyone. Like, he knows everything. So he finds out that there is a hermit not too far away. And he's been a hermit in a cave for years. And he was interested in getting to know this guy. So he gets to the cave, and the cave is in the middle of a lake on an island, so he has to travel by boat to get to the cave. And he talks to the hermit about his spiritual practice. And the hermit tells him, yeah, I'm reciting this mantra over and over again. This is all I do. And the hermit tells him the mantra, and the spiritual teacher says, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, but you said it wrong. This is not the right pronunciation. The right pronunciation of this mantra is so-and-so. And I'm so sorry, but you've just wasted years of your life. And the hermit was like, oh my gosh, like, thank you for letting me know. And I'm going to start right away doing this right way of saying this mantra. Thank you. So the spiritual teacher leaves, goes with the boat, goes back to the mainland. And he's just like in pity of this hermit, thinking like, oh my gosh, this poor guy, he just wasted his life reciting the wrong mantra. Like, I hope that he can at least use this new way of saying this mantra the correct way for the rest of his life. And thank God that I was there to help him with this, because he did it all wrong. And then he hears, oh, hi, excuse me. And then he looks back and he sees the hermit standing on the water. And he was just walking from the cave on the water to the spiritual teacher. And he's like, hey, I forgot how to pronounce the mantra right. Can you repeat it again, please?
Moral of the story.
Moral of the story. The hermit said the mantra wrong the whole time. And he got to this enlightened point that he went mind over matter and he was able to walk on water. And the spiritual teacher, who was practicing everything correctly and was so full of himself, still needed a boat.
Yeah, these are the pieces of wisdom.
Yes, I love that little story.
Me too. I love it so much. And there are so many of those out there.
Oh yeah, Google Zen stories. So fun.
When you said Zen stories, I was like, ooh, I had never heard of a Zen story before. Yeah. I was like, ooh, this must be a special category of story that I need to look into. Thank you, and I will. So I think we've touched on a lot of what we set out to talk on. It's funny because we looked down at our little notes page, and there are some things that we didn't touch on too much, but I think that it's all been summarized in a really great way. And it's funny because now we're getting to the end of the episode and I'm like, we didn't give specific directions on much of anything, which I wonder if some people could be like, man, I feel like I came to this episode thinking I was going to get something, and really it's whatever you want it to be. But it's so true, and I want to let anybody know, I also have a YouTube channel, and I'm going to be leaving the links. I have a link for how to start a spiritual practice and also how to set a spiritual altar. If you do feel that would be beneficial in your life, I definitely have had different altars in my house during different years, and let's kind of smoothly go into the action guide. So the action guide, we want to say, is I'm going to leave the link for those 2 videos. For me, myself, while I find myself pretty much living as a spiritual practice, I consider my life a spiritual practice at this point, and it is still very, very, very nice to me to have a plan, to go and sit at my altar, and then I think of all the things that I want to do that day, and it can just be a very sacred, like, ceremonial sort of ritual, piece of the ritual to show up at a specific place. That's just something that really works for me. So if that resonates with you, I'm going to leave that link down below. And I address a lot of things in that video as well about like the way that it is like to drop the should and the should nots about what a spiritual space is supposed to look like. So I hope that feels good to you. That's a part of the action guide. If you feel that in these next 2 weeks before the next episode that you would really, really benefit from setting a specific place in your house that you can hold yourself accountable to getting to that place and doing your self-reflection in whatever way feels good, I invite you, the action guide for you is to set a little space. And that little space can just look like a blank chair or a little blank table. It doesn't have to look like anything special, but you can make it as decorated and special as you want to.
Yeah, so our action guide is to create a space and choose one practice to stick with. And yeah, just like you just said, it can be any kind of space. it doesn't have to be a physical space, but even just creating space in your everyday life, if it's 10 minutes regularly, and having one practice that you stick with. And I just want to mention here too, I have a Moon Manifestor Mastermind group coming up. We are going to launch on the summer, on the solar eclipse. That's the word. On the solar eclipse in July.
I was like, what?
Yeah, and it's going to be 13 moon cycles long. So here we have the really the ability to let it sink in and to allow it to flow naturally into your life. So if you're interested to bringing in the moon cycle and the moon phases into your regular practice, check it out on my website. The link is going to be below in this episode as well. And that is that.
That is that. I think, hang on one second, because I just want to touch on this. I know it's something that I've struggled with before, that is the idea of that having that discipline. And sometimes I can find myself almost rebelling against discipline because I'm like, well, nothing is going to tell me what to do, and I just don't feel like doing that today. And that is a great thing to check in with if you feel like you need to. But also, I just wanted to touch on one of the branches of yoga is called the niyamas, and the niyamas are a way to look at yourself, to look at the way that you function in life. And one of those 5 ways is called tapas, and tapas is this fiery discipline. So the idea behind embodying that fiery discipline is, if you're listening to this right now and you're saying, oh my gosh, I really want that. I really want to find that time, to find that space that gets me so inspired and so excited to sit down and develop a spiritual practice of my own. If you're finding yourself excited by this episode, try to embody that and try to instill and plant that seed of that tapas, that fiery discipline inside of yourself. And those days when you're feeling like, I kind of don't feel like it, remind yourself of that little seed. And even if it's just for 5 minutes to go and do that thing, just it feels so good afterwards.
Yes, and it really gives us deeper meaning in life too, and connects us with a deeper flow, especially during these times of like great turmoil in this world. Connecting with the stillness within yourself. You are worthy of that. So worthy. So worthy. And please let us know if this episode resonated with you, and let us know in the reviews, and maybe you're going to be featured for our next episode.
Yes. Thank you so much. We hope that you have a really beautiful rest of your day, and
thank yourself for taking this time and creating that space in your life.
Also share this if you feel that it would resonate with any friends or family members that you love.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful day.
Namaste.
Happy Beltane.
Oh, happy Beltane. Namaste.
Namaste.